In this video, we're talking all the things: transportation, phone and internet, weather, visas, immunizations, food, language. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up because I memorized that whole list and did it in one take. And hey, I'm Finn, and this is Vietnam. If you're looking for a video about bucket list destinations and itineraries, I've got that too. If you're like watching this when it just comes out, it's coming out in a couple days, so check that out. And if you are curious about information specific to motorbiking in Vietnam, we've got a lot of information on that. Those will be linked below. So let's get into it. This video is broken up into categories and you can follow along at the bottom of the screen here. The first travel tip doesn't fit into a category, so we're just going to mention real quick. Take everything that you know from Uber and Uber Eats, throw them into one app that dominates the Asian market, and that is Grab. Grab is important to have because Grab is probably the first thing that you're going to use when you land in any of the Vietnamese airports, because then you can grab your ride right to your first hotel. Then when you get to your hotel and you're exhausted, ordering food from the Grab app is super convenient. Not to mention all the food in Vietnam is very budget friendly, and in the app all of the restaurants have English on the menu. So feed yourself before you go out and hit the streets. Perfect segue into our first category of communication, that is talking about phone and internet. I have a primarily American audience that watches this. Using SIM cards and phone is kind of foreign to us, so if you're American, you don't know what I'm talking about, go and research that about grabbing a SIM card in the country that you're entering. If you already know what I'm talking about, go ahead and grab your SIM card right in the airport. They're affordable, it's super convenient. It's so commonly purchased right there in the airport that that's really the easiest place to get it done. That way you can then affiliate your Vietnamese phone number with the Grab app. That way you can use it anytime. You can download Grab right when you get into the airport using either your new SIM card or airport Wi-Fi. Which brings us to Vietnamese Wi-Fi, which is going to blow your mind. I'm telling you, as digital nomads, as YouTubers, obviously we're always on that hunt of the internet chase, and it has got to be the best country that we travel to for internet. I mean, it's better than the US, like it is awesome.
Shame on you, Comcast. Shame on you.
You're gonna be fine. Wi-Fi is also readily available in many of the modes of transportation in Vietnam when you're talking about buses and trains. And let's dive into this topic a little bit deeper. It is easy to get around Vietnam. So we talked about the Grab app earlier. You can grab a seat in a car just like an Uber. You can also grab a seat on the back of a motorbike through the Grab app. A motorbiker will come up, they've got an extra helmet, throw it on your head, and off you go. That's a cheaper rate to use the Grab motorbike. If you're talking about transportation, moving between city and city, you're traveling through Vietnam.
Good morning.
We've got the bus, the train, and a flight. The buses in Vietnam is the most uncomfortable way to travel in the country. There are sleeper buses available that might seem like a cute idea, but it's extremely uncomfortable. The roads are very narrow. You're likely going through some type of mountainous region, and do not plan on getting a good night's sleep. I want to be very opinionated for you when it comes to the buses. We do not recommend traveling this way. This is your budget option, but it's likely negligibly more expensive to take the train. It shouldn't sway you not to pay the extra $5 or something to take an overnight train. Make sure you're at least taking one train on your Vietnamese trip. It's just kind of a novel thing to do. When you're shopping for seats online, I recommend doing it in advance if you can. If not, you can always purchase them at the train station. You just might not get maybe the cabin or seat type that you want. You are deciding between a hard berth and a soft berth. So it's just talking about the comfort of your bed or seat. If we're talking about an overnight train trip, the cabins within the train cars have 4 beds. So if you and your partner are traveling together, you might end up with 2 other travelers or 2 other local Vietnamese that are traveling also within the same small car. As far as safety and your stuff goes, that your luggage is in the car with you. So, you know, you can kind of go to sleep and everything's right there. The only exception to a 4-person car is if you're taking the overnight train from Hanoi up into Sapa in northern Vietnam. On that route, there's some tourist trains that allow you to purchase the entire car. There's only 2 beds in there. So that's kind of a fun, novel experience, but that's more of an expensive trip compared to the rest of the country. I'll talk about this more in our itinerary video, but Vietnam is a very long country. It's over 1,000 miles south to north, so that's about the distance of Florida to New York. So you are likely traveling quite a distance depending on how many locations you want to see in Vietnam, which brings me to flights. Domestic flights in Vietnam are so affordable that don't not look into flights because you are assuming it's expensive. If you were coming to the US to travel and you were flying from Florida to Virginia and Virginia to New York, you know, that might cost you $500. But in Vietnam, it might only be like $45 for a seat to get from Saigon to Da Nang and Da Nang up to Hanoi. So lots of affordable transportation options that can save you loads of time. In conclusion, I'd recommend starting by looking at domestic flights within the country and then work your way down to train, and then finally the bus if maybe there's not a train route in that area, like for example up to Ha Giang. This very long, narrow country does have a lot of diversity, which leads me to talk about weather. Don't just assume that because Vietnam is in Southeast Asia that it's always hot and humid. Think about a day in March in Florida versus New York. It could be 85 degrees down in Florida and it could be 40 and raining up in New York. Throw in some jungle, some mountains, and some, you know, it's not the same climate. So throw in rainy season and things that happen in Asia and you've got yourself quite a dramatic temperature and weather change throughout the country. So not only do your research on the places you want to go, but the specific weather for that specific city or location. 2 important points I'll discuss on weather specifically. Your Ha Long Bay cruise, if you're picturing yourself, you know, swimming and kayaking, going to the beaches, it's not cold, but it's chilly in the winter, so much so that you probably don't want to swim. So I wouldn't book if Ha Long Bay is on your list, you know, you're not going to want to go in December or January. And then also likely over in northern Vietnam, up in Sapa and Ha Giang, it can even snow up there in the mountains. So if you're doing a motorbike trip up there, visiting up there, you know, make sure you're packing accordingly, especially if you're coming from Saigon, that could be 90 and humid on the same day. Vietnamese food is reason to travel to Vietnam just in and of itself. So instead of making a 5-hour video on all the amazing Vietnamese food, I want to help you navigate your way outside of the restaurants that are catering to travelers and help you navigate a local restaurant. In large cities like Saigon and Hanoi, there is going to be plenty of opportunities to find English on the menus. There's, you know, Italian food, there's hamburgers. You can get just about anything that you can get in a big city. Another just quick thing about food in Vietnam, I'm celiac. The food in Vietnam is so gluten-free friendly there because almost everything is made out of rice. I've never had a gluten moment in Vietnam. Yay. But if you're planning on getting off the beaten path, as you should, here are a couple tips to help you navigate the restaurant situation in Vietnam. So saying helping you navigate a menu isn't exactly accurate. There's likely not a menu at these small restaurants. Walking up to a local Vietnamese restaurant, you will see a big, large sign out in front of it, and it will say the type of food that it is serving and the types of meats that it has. There's loads of food choices in Vietnam, but for the sake of simplicity for this video, let's talk about 3 of them. Okay, you likely already know about pho. You'll probably see on a lot of signs also it's saying com, and then there's also bun, which is popular more in the north of Vietnam. Then next to it in smaller letters, it will share the meats available. You'll see words like bo and ga, beef and chicken. It's popular to eat pork with bun, and so you'll see bun cha. So if you're walking down a local street and you'll see a sign for com and you'll see a sign over here for pho, okay, what do you want? You want rice? You want soup? You head in that general direction. Then when you arrive at the restaurant, then you're gonna tell them what type of dish you want. Do you want a chicken or a beef dish? You have got to have the Vietnamese coffee when you go to Vietnam. So you can also look for cafe. That one's easy to remember, right? And it is popularly served sữa da with condensed milk and ice. So now we're getting a little bit more complicated in talking about the language. So let me help run you through a little bit about the Vietnamese language. I am not a Vietnamese speaker. I do, however, have my master's in Spanish and spent a lot of time due to my program in university level linguistics programs. So I'm coming from somewhere when I talk about this. So Vietnamese is a tonal language, meaning the way that you say or sing the word changes the meaning. So for example, we talked about the word for beef is 2 letters, B-O, but you can say that word in multiple different ways and it means different things. The good news is that the tone for both chicken and beef sound the same, so you can remember it in that way. They both have the accents above the vowel that slant downwards, so your sound is traveling downwards. For example, pho, ga, pho, bo. The reason why that's important is because we're typically asking for that at a restaurant. And in English, we're using tone to indicate a question. For example, can I get you anything? Chicken soup? Soup? The question intonation is raising, but you don't want to change the word of chicken or beef by asking for it. So you always want to say it like a statement and come down. Pho bo, pho ga, and not pho ga? Question mark? No, that's a different word. I don't even know what the word is, but it's different. And also what's helpful is knowing xin chào, xin chào. And this one's a lot tougher because from our understanding, the pronunciation of this is different in both the South and the North, but it's cảm ơn, cảm ơn. That was our best attempt at saying thank you in the South. That was less effective in the North, I think, based on our pronunciation. So that one's a little bit tougher, but I can tell you that if you show up with a xin chào just about anywhere or to kids on the street, you are likely to get a xin chào back.
Xin chào. Xin chào.
I know, you didn't know you were going to school watching this video. So how about more engaging topics like fun stuff like visas? You need a visa when you go to Vietnam. I'm speaking to American travelers, but that's also likely the case for many of you watching. We Americans are fortunate to have such a great passport that gets us visa-free or visa on arrival into so many countries that it feels unnatural at this point now to apply for a visa before you enter a country. But that is required for Vietnam. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean you have to go drive to your nearest consulate and make an appointment and it's this whole huge thing, but you do need to apply online for an e-visa before you arrive. So you will pay a fee online before you go. Make sure you're doing this far enough advance that you have your waiting and approval periods. Don't do this the day before you go. At least a week in advance, you will get it. You'll get your visa approved. You will print it out. I know. Print it out and carry it with you and bring it to Vietnam. Then you will show up at the airport and then you will hand it to immigration and then they will check everything over and then approve you once you are there. But there's more, time involved in doing that. Just so you know, this is part of the whole process of getting to Vietnam. You're just not going to get off the plane and go through and then look at your passport and give you a little stamp. So it's a little bit more in depth. So make sure, go do your research about the visa according to the country of your passport. Oh, another just super fun topic is immunizations. I didn't really fully understand this before we started traveling. Okay, so all of these countries, they're not requiring you to receive a vaccination before you arrive. You're not handing them a piece of paper saying, I'm immunized for X, Y, and Z. The immunization recommendations are medical recommendations from, let's say, the country that you live in, or if you visit your doctor. So these are just recommendations for you to go. For example, it's recommended you receive a tetanus shot or you're up to date on your tetanus vaccine, because if you're walking through a waterfall with flip-flops on and you step on a rusty nail, it's a good idea to be up to date on tetanus. And the thought of that is just you're doing more adventurous things than walking into the office. If you're not up to date on tetanus is probably low risk, right? Your hepatitis vaccination is another recommended vaccination. But once you start getting into these deeper things like Japanese encephalitis or taking malaria pills or typhoid pills, that's a little bit more on the safer side, which isn't good or bad, but it's not necessarily required. So if you're just curious what Tim and I do, we've never taken malaria pills anywhere, typhoid pills, that Japanese encephalitis is a random thing. That is completely up to you, but part of the issue with pills, for example, especially malaria, is some things you walk in, you get a shot, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Other things are bringing pills with you. Sometimes things need to be refrigerated, things are expensive. So do your research on that and consult with a medical professional, which I am not. Now you have the information of the fact that no, there's no specific vaccinations that are required to enter Vietnam. So that's all the fun in this video, but wait, we can still hang out. If you want more, make sure you check out the Vietnamese itinerary video that will help you think through some bucket list destinations and how to manage your time while you're in the country. And motorbikers. I know this is coming from some random blonde chick on the internet, but yeah, we have motorbiked all over the country. We did the Hanoi, well, we did the Saigon to Hanoi trip. We've done the Ha Giang Loop. We've done up in Sapa. We've done places that you've never even heard of that we didn't even realize we were going to. So we have motorbiked all over Vietnam. If you want more motorbike information, then while this video was helpful, head over to some other videos with me and we'll really dive into motorbiking Vietnam. And subscribe and then we'll be friends. And then I'll see you in the next video. Bye.